things aren't so simple now. Times have changed, and so have the demands on carburetors. These demands include maintaining the drivability and fuel economy our machines were famous for prior to emission controls, as well as keeping exhaust pollutants to a minimum for everybody's benefit. The latest Honda carburetors are specially designed to meet these challenges, but they also have their own special service requirements, and that's what this program is all about. After viewing it, you'll be able to identify new features of Honda carburetors, follow the recommended diagnostic sequence, and clean and adjust Honda carburetors. Yes, today's motorcycle carburetors have a big job. They've evolved from simple air-fuel mixers into precise instruments that offer a degree of fuel control not seen in the past. So let's begin with a closer look at some features that may be new to you, like the bi-starter enrichment circuit, diaphragm piston, float bowl venting, and RFVC dual carburetors. These are features that affect your job. They impact the troubleshooting and service procedures that you do every day. On most Hondas, the bi-starter is controlled by a choke lever on the handlebar. The bi-starter circuit is very important because it works throughout the carburetor's entire operating range, not just at idle. This makes it different from most other carburetor enrichment systems. With the bi-starter valve open, high intake vacuum draws fuel into the venturi from the bi-starter jet. And when the throttle is open, intake vacuum draws a rich air-fuel mix from the main circuit. This is because air from the main air bleed is diverted to the bi-starter circuit. Another feature is the thinner diaphragm vacuum piston, which replaces the heavier all-metal vacuum piston. Made of hydrin rubber, it offers lighter weight and improved throttle response. As a matter of fact, throttle response is so good with the diaphragm vacuum piston that an accelerator pump is unnecessary. Diaphragm inspection is very important. There should be no tears, holes, or deterioration. If you find any, replace the diaphragm. Also check the sealing groove for corrosion that could cause poor sealing. And when you reinstall the chamber cover for V-type engines, make sure that its cavity lines up with the hole in the diaphragm. Okay, now let's look at float bowl venting. It varies from model to model. There are two types of float bowl venting, external and internal. External means the tubes open to the atmosphere. Internal means the tubes open to the air filter. But with internal venting, air pressure on fuel in the bowl is less than atmospheric. This is because when the engine is running, air is being drawn from the air filter where there's a slight vacuum. So the carburetor is jetted to compensate for the decreased air pressure in the float bowl. If you get a complaint about engine surging or other lean running symptoms with the VT700 or 750, check the vent hose routing. It can get pinched shut in the area shown. And if a customer complains that his machine runs only at idle or just above, inspect the vent lines for cracks or loose connections that would allow atmospheric pressure into the float bowl. Here's an important tip. 1983 V45s have jets in their vent lines to control air pressure in the float bowls. Inspect them when servicing the carburetors. Without them, the engine will run lean at mid and full throttle, and the customer may complain of engine surging. With external venting, air pressure inside the float bowl is the same as it is outside. At sea level, that means 14.7 psi. In other words, atmospheric pressure helps push the fuel through the carburetor circuits. One of the most unusual carburetor systems from Honda is the dual carburetor assembly used on the larger XR and XL models with radial 4-valve heads. It has no special service requirements, and while it looks complicated, it's quite simple in operation. For example, only the primary carburetor has low-speed mixture and idle adjustments, because the secondary carburetor has no low-speed circuit. So if you have a twin carb XL or XR with idle or low-speed problems, check the primary carburetor. High-speed problems? Check both the primary and the secondary. There's a progressive linkage between the primary and secondary carburetors, but it should only be adjusted when the carburetor assembly has been separated for service. New features? Lots of them. Innovations like the bi-starter, hydrin vacuum diaphragm, float bowl venting, and the RFVC dual carburation system have all been developed to meet the needs of a changing world. Now let's look at a diagnostic sequence that will help you quickly isolate a possible carburetor problem. Do yourself a favor when pursuing a complaint. Take each of these steps one at a time. Experience shows that this sequence is the most efficient method of zeroing in on a problem. First, through proper questioning and listening, the service advisor accurately describes the customer's complaint on the repair order. He also finds out what kind and how old the fuel is. Then he tells you what to look for during a test ride. Now try to duplicate the complaint on a test ride. If you suspect a faulty mixture, ride the motorcycle with the choke partially on. If running improves, the mixture is probably too lean. But if it runs worse, the mixture is probably too rich. And if it doesn't change at all, the choke or the ignition may be the cause of the complaint. Remember that the enriching effect of the bi-starter is greatest below 1/4 throttle. Before you even put a screwdriver to a carburetor, eliminate the other possible sources of trouble. These quick and easy checks will save you more time than they take. After you've verified the complaint, make sure it's not caused by poor fuel quality. In past years, fuel quality was fairly uniform, but today, quality varies a lot, causing many drivability problems. If a customer complains about poor power, hard starting, or backfiring through the carburetor, the trouble could easily be caused by the fuel he's been using. Are you sure the engine's getting fuel? Verify fuel flow by first draining the float bowls. If they're dry, run a fuel flow test. Do it with the engine being cranked over, or apply vacuum to the petcock like this. There are several reasons for insufficient fuel flow, including a clogged petcock, faulty fuel pump, plugged fuel cap vent, a plugged fuel tank vent hose on California models, and a clogged inline fuel filter. In the event of inconsistent vacuum gauge readings, or the customer complains that the engine surges or won't idle down properly, an air leak might be the cause. So try this. Spray WD-40 on the manifold. If there is an air leak, the engine will slow down or even stall as fluid is drawn into the leaking area. A few more tips. Always consider the bi-starter linkage and the float bowl vents when servicing and troubleshooting. Remember too the service bulletins that describe special remedies for the special complaints of some models. Also, drain the fuel tank and float bowls and substitute fresh, good quality gasoline from a high volume dealer and see if that solves the problem. If it does, it's likely the fuel was winter grade sold in hot weather, had alcohol in it, was old, or contaminated with water. Some V4 owners have complained about difficult hot engine restarting caused by fuel boiling in the carburetors when the bike is parked. Fuel vapors collect in the air filter and make the mixture richer. So suggest that the customer try this restart procedure. Crank the engine with the throttle held about 1/4 open. It should start within seconds. Also, according to the laws of some states, even if pump fuel is not called gasohol, it might have some alcohol in it, and just a little alcohol can cause erratic running. After you have eliminated fuel as the problem, run a leak down test to make sure the problem isn't mechanical. This test checks ring and valve sealing at the same time. Poor cylinder sealing can mimic some carburetor problems. If leak down is past limits, poor running results. For example, after break-in, 2 to 8% leak down is common for V4s, but more than 12% means something's wrong that even new carburetors won't fix. And remember this, one of the first indicators of faulty cylinder sealing is poor engine idling. Specifically, failure to return to idle, a rough idle, or stalling can be caused by excessive leak down. If the engine is okay mechanically, perform a spark test. It makes the ignition work harder. A weak ignition spark can mimic carburetor complaints too, contributing to hesitation when accelerating and less obvious complaints. Just pull a spark plug lead from its plug and fit an adjustable spark gap tool to the lead. Crank the engine with a spark gap at 6 millimeters or more as specified on your shop manual. A healthy spark should jump the gap. If it doesn't, fix the ignition, not the carburetors. All right, if you've eliminated the other likely causes of trouble, now's the time to inspect the carburetors. If the complaint is related to low-speed operation, check the low-speed circuits by performing an idle drop on them. However, if an idle drop procedure doesn't cure a low-speed complaint, Or if symptoms suggest another carburetor circuit, the carburetor may have to come apart. But before you get involved deeper, call Honda's emissions tech line. The technicians here have the latest fuel system data for you, and it's no farther away than your phone. Honda emission-controlled carburetors have anti-tamper plugs or limiter caps on the low-speed mixture screws, so you've got to remove the plugs or caps before cleaning or adjustment. Anti-tamper plugs are found on later Honda carburetors. Installing new low-speed mixture screws is not always necessary during reassembly. Removal is a simple job, but it takes a gentle hand. Here's how it's done. A brass tube over the 8-inch long 4mm or 5/32 drill bit allows just enough penetration of the plug to avoid touching the adjusting screw behind it. You can get the brass tubing at just about any hobby shop, and the drill bit is sold by most tool dealers. The plug and screw are close together.